to have the debate and the conversation that is coming up on the Move today. One topic that continues to sit on the margins of public conversation is the conversation about intersex persons. This term refers to people born with biological sex characteristics that do not fit typical definitions of male or female, yet their realities are seldom openly discussed in many African societies. As awareness grows through advocacy, research, and media attention, there's a key question that arises. Is African society ready to openly discuss intersex identities, or do cultural and religious sensitivities still make the conversation difficult? That is our debate topic for today, and joining us in this one is Peace Maquba, who's the founder and director of Intersexions, a community-based organization that's focused on creating visibility, promoting education, and building safe spaces for intersex persons. We also have Faith Edmunds, who is an LGBTQI plus activist and director of the Color Me Foundation, an organization that's championing LGBTQI plus inclusion in rural and small town communities. Thank you both for joining me this morning and agreeing to participate in the African View debate. I'm going to start with you, Faith. Thank you so much for your time this morning. I think it's so important before we actually have the debate itself. There must be so many people that still don't understand what intersex persons are, or how they present, and I think it seems to be conflated quite a lot with the chosen sexuality of a particular person or a choice of sexuality. Could you explain to us, what does intersex mean?
Thank you so much for having me on this important conversation. Thank you so much for inviting Peace, because also as an organization, we rely highly on intersex people to be able to tell their own lived realities. So we have been following Peace and the work that they do in the African context, so that even when we speak to people, we do not give people information that is wrong. So as an activist that is primarily working in rural areas and small towns, we are still learning in terms of all the information that we need when it comes to the intersex community. But we do understand that intersex people are people that are born with different sexual characteristics. It is not only about the private organs, but it can be a variation in chromosomes. So this information is deeply needed in rural areas and small towns. And this is why I personally took the opportunity to be part of this debate, because recently we have been doing a lot of work in schools, and we have realized that we are still behind in terms of how to properly package who is an intersex people and what is the definition of that.
Peace, let me come to you. Thank you, Peaceworth. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation as well. Very important organization that you have there. And I think we got, quite a basic definition that we've been speaking about so far. But why is it important to create more visibility for intersex persons, and of course, more education in our African societies on the issue of intersex persons?
Thank you so much for having me. One of the challenges that intersex people face in society is that people don't want to talk about intersex people. Intersex people also don't feel comfortable speaking about the fact that they're different. And so just demystifying things and creating safe spaces in order for intersex people to come out and say, oh yeah, I'm also intersex. When we do these awareness campaigns at Intersections, a lot of people actually come out and say, I actually have a neighbor who was intersex, or I had a friend who I grew up with who was intersex. And so there are a lot of intersex people that are out there. It is just that, it's not as loud as it should be, and that is why awareness is important. It's just the visibility that is important, and ensuring that communities are made aware of the fact that intersex people are there amongst all of us, just like as much as often as maybe 1 in 10. Like that's how large the population of intersex people is, because being intersex can also be invisible. And so That's important.
Yeah. So let's get into the debate now. I think it was important to start with a little bit of education so we don't make this conversation about a fight between two people on both sides, but rather as an opportunity for education as well. Peaceworth, you say that African societies are ready to openly discuss intersex identities. Let me know why you think so.
All right. So the truth is that intersex people have always existed in Africa and in African communities. And what is changing today is that more intersex people are coming out and more parents are being open about having children that are intersex, whether it's a person who found out that a child is intersex at birth or it is a teenager. So through organizations like Intersections, we're helping people understand that intersex is a biological variation and can be visible or invisible. So we go into the nitty-gritties, the chromosomes, understanding that hormones play a fact, understanding that it's just a natural variation. So when communities receive the knowledge, the fear gets replaced by understanding, and then a safer place or safer space for intersex people begins to emerge. Because another important fact is that being intersex is not a sexuality, and so when we make that clear, then it is more comfortable to have conversations because a child can't be choosing to be intersex. So it makes it safer to have those conversations with parents. And so I do believe that awareness is getting intersex people a positive spotlight. Yes.
Let's find out from you, Faith, which side you stand in this particular debate when it comes to conversation and visibility. Are Africans ready to have these conversations?
I think Africans are not entirely ready to have these conversations, and I am saying this because majority of these conversations happen in the mainstream and they happen in urban settings. So African countries are most populated by small towns and villages, and most of these conversations then happen offline, not in the mainstream. So as much as there's being visibility that is happening, as much as there's awareness that is happening, I feel that in the places that where it matters the most, where intersex people are still seen as taboo, where intersex people are still sexualized, because the minute when you say I am intersex, what we've heard from different classrooms or campaigns that we've hosted in rural areas and small towns is that the questions become very invasive, and there's a certain level of wanting to ridicule intersex people because we sexualize them. We run to which body part do you have? Do you have both? So as much as I do agree with Peace that there is visibility and awareness where we operate, where we feel like there's a lot of people that need the information, we are not seeing it. A typical example would be of the dialogue that we recently hosted at a rural school, where the Department of Social Development was invited, even teachers that teach life orientation. They were speaking about intersex people from a place of misinformation and misunderstanding. And we realized that it is good that we see it on Facebook, it is good that we see it on the mainstream, but this kind of conversations do not reach the people that we would like to see reach when it comes to this awareness and visibility. So I think Africa might slightly be open, but we still have a long way to go to make sure that the people that deserve this kind of information are able to get it.
All right, let's take a break. Stay with us on the line. Peaceworth and Faith will continue this conversation and debate.
Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za.
Africa Matters. The conversation on climate change and financing Africa's recovery. Only on Channel Africa.
We're proud to announce that Wits Business School is actually our partner. They are hosting us. The second most important thing, though, for me, is that we often go to these summits, these conferences, and you find that you never really know where to find find solutions and outcomes that came out of those discussions. So Wits Business School will craft our outcomes document, which will have steps to say what are the follow-ups and how do we measure success and what do we need to do next.
Across the continent, climate change is forcing tough decisions. This is Africa Matters. Keeping you on the know and on the move.
I think very, very rarely do you find a debate where essentially when it comes to the conversation, the guests are on the same side. That's the side of visibility, the side of advocacy, the side of human rights. However, the debate we're having today is whether or not African societies are ready to openly discuss intersex identities. Joining us still is Peace Maquba and Faith Edmunds in this conversation. Peace, before we went on the break, Faith spoke about the fact that, she agrees with you that, there is advocacy that is taking place. More advocacy is being visible. However, in some of the places that she, works in, which are rural parts of the continent and small communities, intersex people live there as well. But in spaces where information is not easily available, it can be hard to say that those people are ready to have that conversation. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Thank you very much for acknowledging the fact that it's not so easy to scratch anything out when it comes to this conversation, because it is important on all levels, because it's still a topic. And so when it comes to the rural areas, what is important is us physically going there and being present in spaces where conversations about intersex identities are happening. Because as you had stated in the beginning, that Intersections is a community organization. And so we do go into the rural areas and we do make it our point that we speak about intersex as a biological trait in the language that is spoken in that particular place. For example, in Newcastle, we have an intersex activist who works there and has had a community dialogue with the chief in the area. And the chief actually mentioned that he had been with an intersex person before. And so it isn't that the conversation is not happening. It just maybe hasn't come to your area because you haven't invited Intersections there. So we are here to do that kind of work. And it's also very important that it is delivered in a language that people can understand. And that is why we believe that visibility and awareness is growing and is taking traction, and in a safe way, because people are very open to understanding things that God creates. So
hey, I don't know about that statement. Faith, Peaceworth says people are open to, the things that God creates. And because, being intersex is biological, so you are born with it. But some of the things that people say, and I guess the misunderstanding of it related to sexual identity, and like you said earlier, the sexualization of intersex person makes it very different. Do you think people are as accepting of the things that God makes, the biological aspect of intersex people, or are they still conflating it, particularly with issues that are connected to their cultural norms and their religious beliefs?
I think people are still using cultural beliefs and religious beliefs to govern their thinking and how we ultimately treat each other. I mean, cultural beliefs and traditional beliefs is what, as Africans say, this is what makes us Africans. So I think in the conversations that we have had, whether it is a tribal authority or the chieftaincy, they have been really clueless when it comes to the intersex community. In the rural areas and the small towns that we are working in, we still have to define what a transgender person is. So the minute when you speak about the intersex community, they move us back to say, but we are still trying to understand this particular letter, and you are coming again with something new. And they are saying something new because of the oppression and the discrimination that intersex people have been facing, because of most of them do live in silence, they do live in secrecy. So because they are not really familiar with intersex people coming out in rural areas and small towns, while now they are familiar with transgender people or just other alphabets of the LGBTQIA+. So they feel like the minute we try to understand this particular letter, you bring up another letter that we also have to take time and understand. So I do believe that maybe in different areas where the work has been rolled out, the views might be different. But from the reality that we live in the remote rural areas and small towns that we exist in, we have really heard conversations about intersex people. It is things that we pick up from the mainstream. And then from the mainstream, they influence the kind of information that runs on the ground. But also that information, it is not clear. There's nobody that can properly articulate what an person is. And in the rural areas and small towns that we exist in, intersex people do not want to come out and be part of advocacy. And we do understand that, because it is life-threatening for them, and they just want to exist without having people discriminate against them and people threatening them. And another typical example that I can make is that on our WhatsApp line, we've had a lot of intersex people come from Nigeria and Uganda and even Lesotho that send us WhatsApp text to say, can you please come and help us with advocacy in these countries? So for us, it said, the conversation is still a bit closed. If in your own community, you do not feel safe in terms of coming out and speaking about yourself, and you have to seek refugee or help from a different organization that is not in your country, it says there's still a huge gap of intersex people being allowed to openly express themselves, and people also just acknowledging that intersex people have always existed since the beginning of time. The fact that they are discriminated and they're stand on what pushes them to secrecy, because at the end of the day, your safety is important in everything.
All right, that's all we have time for. I thank you to both of you, not just for participating in the debate, but making sure that it's an opportunity to learn and to continue raising awareness on intersex persons. Peaceworth, where can we find you? Where can we find your organization to get more information?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. So if you search on Facebook, Intersections, spelled INTERSEXIONS, and you'll find us everywhere on Instagram, on TikTok. So some of the handles, it's at intersections.org. Some of the handles is just at Intersections. And for me personally, it's at Peaceworth XYZ or Peaceworth X on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And I'm happy and to engage with everybody there.
Thank you. Faith, let us know where we can find you and your organization as well.
Okay, you can find us on www.kalamifoundation.org.za. You can also find us on Facebook under Kalami Foundation, TikTok, Kalami Foundation, and Instagram, Kalami Foundation. However, our biggest community lives on Facebook. So I do advise you to connect with us on our Facebook platform.
Once again, thank you so much to Peace Maquba and Faith Edmunds having this one. You may continue this debate on our social media platforms. However, it is 10:30 Central Africa time. Time to bring back Musibudi Makura with our latest sports.